in my story this week here on the broadcast about a compassionate giver. We get to see what compassion was, and we got to see what compassion was not. We talked about yesterday about a man who should have been the epitome of compassion, because he was a priest. He was a man who was responsible for bringing people to God and helping them to deal with their sins and their transgressions. He had a very high position in the church. But when it came a time when he should be taking on the demeanor and the character of God, he did just the opposite. Because this man, and we're talking about the story, we usually call it the story of the Good Samaritan, but I'm calling it the story of the compassionate giver, because he was in such direct contrast to this man and the other man that we'll talk about in just a bit. But this man, he actually looked down. He saw that man down there. He saw his condition. He saw that he was nigh unto death, and absolutely refused to do anything about it and walked away. And I don't know whether his conscience ever bothered him or not. All I know that he was the exact opposite of the compassionate giver that we'll refer to in just a little bit. But then here comes a man who is described as a Levite. And of course the Levites were held in great esteem. And don't read much about the Levites in the New Testament, because it's just say it this way, their time had pretty much come and gone. But they still had the form and the trappings of religiosity, but yet it was virtually shallow and empty. And there certainly wasn't any compassion there, because it says when this man came by, he didn't even bother to even give it a second look. He saw the man in the ditch, but he didn't go down and even look at it. He just walked right on by, because his heart was cold and calloused. And unfortunately, that condition is still alive and well in this world. There are many people who have the titles of people who should love and care for people, but yet there's no compassion there. But here we find a man. This man was a compassionate giver, because it says by chance he came along and he sees the situation, and he sees a man who is desperate. We don't know anything about that man in the ditch. We don't know whether he was a Jew or a Gentile. We don't know just nothing. All we know that he was a man who was on his way to Jericho, and he was beaten and he was robbed and left in the ditch to die. But here come a man of great compassion. Scripture tells us he had compassion, and he was moved to do something about it. And he did. This is Pastor Jack King with the gospel on the radio broadcast.